This from Matthew on X. Now that Paul Pogba can play again in the new year, does he have a future at Juventus or even in European football, Andy?
It's a really good question. I think straight off, with us knowing that he can train from around Christmas time, just before Christmas, he's allowed to do full team training from then, and he can play again from March. It's almost certain that he won't be playing for Juventus again. Obviously, even before we got to the doping ban, his second spell had been a washout really for them. I don't think Juventus have been deeply disappointed that they haven't had to pay him full whack over the last while he's been suspended, because especially with not only has he failed to live up to expectations, but in terms of the direction that Juventus have been trying to go into under Cristiano Giuntoli, the sporting director, they're trying to get younger, bring the wage bill down. Now, Pogba is not in synchronisation with either of those things. So clearly, they're going to want to get rid of him. Clearly, he wants a fresh start, which is why we're heading probably towards this contract rescission. I mean, for me, it was fascinating when you, straight after his ban, you had Thiago Motta doing his pre-match press conference before the game against Cagliari last weekend. And he was asked about it, and he tried to play it as straight back as possible. But he said, Pogba was a great player, but he's not played for a really long time. And he said, did he just say Pogba was a great player? I mean, just the use of tense there is really important. But I think he's probably reflective of the whole Juventus attitude to him. The fact is, he last played in September 2023, which is ages ago now. It'll be a year and a half that he's played, and he hadn't played that much before that. That was a comeback of sorts, because he worked really hard that summer to get fit, and that's why the doping ban was such a blow for him particularly, as well as all the off-field stuff that he'd been having to put up with. We have no idea. We know what sort of player Paul Pogba has been. We have no idea what sort of player is coming back. And I guess for that reason, going on to the second part of what Matthew was saying, David, MLS or Saudi seems the most obvious next stop.
It's funny because I think it's Marseille.
You think it's Marseille?
I want the madhouse, man. I saw that link and my eyes lit up. I'd absolutely,
it's the sort of punt they would take.
It absolutely is, and he just seems to fit that mad mould of signings that they seem to be making these days. So yes, I would like.
So you're militating for a Højbjerg, Pogba, Rabiot midfield. Oh my goodness!
I mean, you'd tune in to watch it, wouldn't you?
You should be kept off Football Manager. You're a danger to society.
Please make that happen. No, I would love to see him. A couple of more years in Europe before inevitably I think you'll end up in MLS or Saudi. I think probably MLS. Him and his best mate Griezmann, MLS in a couple of years.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, there you go.
For those who are wondering why his doping ban was reduced by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, their argument is that his ingestion of a banned substance was not intentional. That opens up the way for him to be considered by teams in Europe, though, doesn't it?
It does, but I mean, it's difficult. Say we look at the situation with Juventus and his contract is cancelled in, say, the next couple of weeks. He goes and starts informally training with another team, so
Marseille,
for example, so they can get a look at nice discreet place where you're not going to get any media attention. That's probably the ideal bit. But then he can't play till March, and then it's going to take him like weeks, maybe a couple of months, to get into the sort of place where he can really influence a team.
A Marseille title running.
Is
that what you get at? Yeah.
Oh my God, you're not going to let us go.
No, I am absolutely not.
From Joe, moving on, from Joe on the OTC Discord channel. After the embarrassing penalty scenes in the Fiorentina versus Milan game, how have fans responded to their club? And is there any confidence at all in Fonseca to resolve these clear issues in the team, or do the scenes expose his time is already up? this needs a little bit of fleshing out background-wise for those who don't know. Andy.
Yeah, so Milan played at Fiorentina last Sunday night. Managed to miss not one but two penalties. Teo Hernandez and Tammy Abraham. Two really good saves by David De Gea, who, quite apart from the penalty saves, had a fantastic match. By the way, he's looking good, and you know we can talk about players making choices at various stages in careers. He seems to have made a very good choice in going to Fiorentina. Now, I guess the point that Joe's making is that Paulo Fonseca had appeared to designate penalty responsibilities to Christian Pulisic, and the players just didn't action that. Oh. Now, of course, I don't think it's necessarily a drama if we look at the fact that both Teo Hernandez and Tammy Abraham are recognised penalty takers.
Yeah, but what about Christian Pulisic? How did he respond to that?
Well, look, I think it's really difficult because you've got a situation at the moment where Pulisic has been playing really well this season. It feels as if he's maybe even Milan's most important player, perhaps beyond Rafael Leao at the moment. But I think the fact that Teo Hernandez misses the first one is quite important because, and you know, it is the way in football that perception becomes reality quite quickly, because in the early weeks of Fonseca at Milan, where it looks like he's like having to fight hard to establish some sort of authority. Now, again, I think this is perception with Fonseca because he's quite a slow starter. There's always a bit of change. He's getting across a lot of new ideas to these players. But of course, there has been the perception, David, in the opening weeks of the season that Teo Hernandez and Rafael Leao, two players who he should be really relying on, who have voices in the dressing room and who are the two highest paid players on the books, that they have not quite been rowing in the same direction as the rest of the team and maybe undermining him a little bit, which I don't think is necessarily fair, but that's certainly the perception, isn't it?
Yeah, I think very much the spotlight at the moment is on the players more than the coach. I think it would be a bit too soon to, based upon the start what they have had, and make a decision based upon that. I think the players need to get in order more than anything, and the elder players in there, shall we say, should be getting hold of things and get everybody going in the right direction.
I guess does Zlatan have a role in this?
Well, this is the issue. Zlatan isn't a player anymore, and when I'm saying there needs to be a stronger head personality in the dressing room, I don't mean Zlatan coming down a few flights of stairs into San Siro. I mean players who are actually in the team.
Can you imagine hearing those footsteps?
Yeah. No.
Oh, he's coming up the corridor, lads.
Yeah. There's lots of reports already about, as we head into national break, that Zlatan's going to have a word with a few people and say where things are going, this mediator sort of role. But the players need to do that themselves. There's obviously a couple who, Pulisic is one of them who is rowing in the right direction. But others, I think, need to step up because these are big names as well, and Hernandez and Leao, who have got their reputations to think about here. So yeah, I think Fonseca himself will get a bit more slack.
This question from Sebastian on Instagram. Why is nobody talking about Omar Marmoush? Could we see him get a big move in January? This is the, I suppose, informed player in the Bundesliga. In fact, more than informed. He's exceeded all expectations, surely, Andy.
It's remarkable. 8 goals and 4 assists in the first 6 games. I mean, you did not hear that wrong, by the way. 8 goals and 4 assists in the first 6 games, including a brace against Bayern last weekend. Now, if you're saying, Sebastian, that nobody's talking about him, I'm talking about him, we're talking about him, you're talking about him, definitely people are talking about him because he has come out the blocks in explosive fashion. And I think if there is something that's going to make people talk more about him, it is that big performance against Bayern. Not just 2 goals, 2 really good goals. He's present in everything they do in the final third as well. He's got speed, he's dead-eyed in front of goal, he's very aware of the players around him, and there's always been something about Marmoush. Whether it was always necessarily going to translate into him being an absolute elite level player, I've I've doubts over. It was clear that it was there at Wolfsburg, and then he was signed on a free when he left by Eintracht Frankfurt, and this is Eintracht Frankfurt all over in the transfer market, which we'll come back to in a little second. But Marmoush was fairly close to joining Nottingham Forest last summer, so there's been Premier League interest in him before. I think Forest's chance has been and gone. You know, you look at the way he started this season, massive clubs are going to be interested in Marmoush now. It's clear that he can produce consistently at the highest level against the best teams. And this is Eintracht Frankfurt all over. Like, they're one of the best run clubs in terms of transfers that are out there in Europe. And people don't really talk about it. But you look at the fact they've put they've signed Marmoush for free, and they will be selling him for maybe not 100 million, but maybe not that far off. By the time if we get a season worth of this, they'll be pretty much able to name their price at the end of the season. Now, let's go backwards a little bit. Think of the profit they made on William Pacho when they sold him to PSG. The year before that, Randal Kolo Muani, who they signed for free and sold for 100 million to PSG. And they did that in the space of the season. So there is precedent for them being able to do that. Then you look at the other players they made massive profits on. Andrés Silva, Luka Jovic. You know, this is a plan, and this is definitely a plan. Even before this run that Marmoush is having at the moment, they've got an objective, which at the end of this season is to knock out another couple of players that they didn't buy for that much for a lot of money. And the two key candidates are Marmoush and Hugo Larsson in midfield. They're the two. But Marmoush, they are in this position where he's playing so well that if it keeps going, they'll basically be able to have an auction, won't they?
He just seems the quintessential Frankfurt player in the sense that just where do they find them? Why do they find them and nobody else does? And why? And
what do they do to them to make them so?
That was my next. That was my next thing I was about to say. And how do they do this consistently as well? That they shape these players, because there's been a few instances now of players who aren't necessarily a young thing that they have worked up, but somebody who is of a mid-level, 24, 25 or anything like that.
Well, and Andrés Silva came there after a few big club failures.
Yeah, exactly. And they're still able to do that and to carve that out, and consistency there, to find that consistency, maybe just the structure, just generally how they are.
I mean, it's a funny thing, because it's not just. I think you have to look at the wider coaching team and the environment. Like Marcus Kröscher, the sporting director, does a really good job in identifying these players. But you can't just look at a particular coach, because, of course, they've gone through quite a few different coaches. If we're looking over that period of why they've recruited those players and then managed to sell them on. But I wonder if a buyer, you might have a little bit of a look at it, and maybe, as you say, Dotun, it's something particular to the environment, because PSG aren't over the moon. Well, Luis Enrique certainly isn't over the moon with the production he's got from Randal Kolo Muani. As we said, Andrés Silva had a couple of big club failures before then, and has not done brilliantly at Leipzig since he left, and Real Sociedad weren't prepared to go all the way and buy him last summer, having had him on loan. Then you look back at Luka Jovic, which is something else entirely, by the way. Sebastian Haller, mixed results, etc. So I think that if you're going to go and buy an Eintracht Frankfurt player, you really need to do your research. If they've done brilliantly there, how do you transfer that to your club, because it's not necessarily a given?
Exactly what I'm thinking. It's a hard one, isn't it, to decipher? If somebody has had that one impressive year there, how do you justify spending, in Marmoush's case, say they said 80 to 100 million? That's a lot of money, and 1 year, essentially.
Question for you, David. Simon on X asks, how do you think Barca will adapt to having Gavi and De Jong back and fitting into Flick's new system? I
think De Jong might be the odd man out here. I feel like his days are numbered at Barca. I think number one is that he doesn't seem to really fit the style and what Flick is trying to put across, in my opinion. And number two, they have a group of players, a batch of players now, largely who they have produced, nearly entirely actually, that they have produced, who they can rely upon. I think previously there was a period in which it was, we need Frenkie in the team, we need him back from injury, we need him around, he's the one who holds everything together, he makes us play better. Fast forward now, and you have several other players who can do that. Pedri is an absolute first name on the team sheet, so he's in there. Gavi goes in as well, just because of the way that he plays. And then I think we cannot be ruling out Marc Casado anymore, who's been one of the revelations this season, I think, in Europe.
That's been great.
Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. 21 years old, no frills. Not in style, but in an attitude and approach, a bit like a Rodri. No frills, just gets on with it. Rolls his sleeves up, just gets on with the job. Puts in a brilliant performance. Helps just be solid, doesn't do anything crazy. And he's been fantastic. He's a young man, and he plays years well beyond where he is. So I feel like that is going to be the core. And I think that Flick's dilemma will be trying to get the pivot working of who he puts in that kind of dual role of whether it's Casado with Gavi or with Casado with Pedri, and how he works that. You've got Dani Olmo obviously playing an advanced role. Pedri and Gavi can both play a little bit further up, but I like Pedri playing a little bit deeper because his vision of the game is absolutely fantastic. The way he scopes the field out is brilliant. So I like him in deeper so he can see everything above him. So that's going to be an interesting one to have. But I very much feel like for the rest of the season, unless there's injuries, and look, Pedri has had them, Gavi has had them, then De Jong is very much going to be the man who comes in as and when. I don't think he's going to be key, and I think we'll be looking at him getting sold next summer probably.
But they've tried to do that a few times before, haven't they? I mean, his salary, or his salary that is reported, he says he's not being paid anywhere near the reported numbers. It's sort of become the hub of a sort of Barcelona culture war, hasn't it, really? And it's a little bit like, if we rewind to the beginning, it's a little bit like Pogba, isn't it? Through no fault of his own, he's become quite anachronistic to the current culture there.
There's two things they've actually got in common, and I think we absolutely money, financial. They're both on big wages, have been on big wages, and also in that nobody really seems to know 100% what is their best role, what is their best function.
Yeah,
and we're not talking about a 21-year-old Frenkie de Jong anymore. We're talking about a player who we should know what he is the best at and what role he excels in the most. I don't think we really do. Is Flick going to say, "Oh, I want to be the man to figure him out"? I don't think he really needs to, given the depth of young talent that he has.
Their midfield's so good.
Yeah.
Why would you focus on that, I suppose?
Yeah, bring up your own, who are on relatively cheap wages, really, and they can probably still get a little bit of money back for De Jong from someone. I don't think they need him. It's a shame because he is a lovely player. When we have seen him at his top, he's a fantastic, graceful player. But I just don't think... I think he's more trouble than he's worth.
When you talk about like getting used to changing circumstances, I guess there are two aspects to that. Firstly, when you said we don't really know what De Jong's best position is, the fact is, because he's played for so many different versions of Barcelona, so he arrives thinking he's joining a winning team, and it becomes clear that that's not the case. Because of the fact that the squad has changed and the objectives have changed so much, that's part of the reason that he's played in lots of different positions, isn't it? Because, he's played as an attacking midfielder, a number 8, a 6, a centre-back at some points as well. He's played in all sorts of different positions that you wouldn't have imagined when he came across from Ajax. And I suppose the other part of it is, like, Barcelona, and this is something obviously that they've been epically bad at over the years, the reason they haven't sold him so far is because they have asked unrealistic numbers from buying clubs in terms of fees. Whereas what they should have focused on, as you say, is like, if the wages are enormous, just get them off the wage bill.
And that has been the big problem for Barcelona, is wage bill. We've gone over this many times. We won't go over it again because I think it gets boring for people. But yeah, we know their wage situation. So this is the top name that they need to get off, absolutely, the wage bill. But they're in that weird juxtaposition of kind of, well, he might not play much, but we do need to retain his value. We do need to make him an asset for somebody potentially. So they're in a funny hole in that sense, but at the same time, they are very, very happy with the incredible young core of talent that they have got in midfield.
We do get a lot of questions from listeners for Ask OTC, and we have to sort of go through them to select the ones that work for the conversation that we're having, the ones that are most illuminating, enables you both to have your sparkling wit and add that to it. But there is one subject that we could not avoid on this edition, and that is, I suppose, exampled by this question from Fernando on Instagram. Now that Andrés Iniesta has announced his retirement from football, what is his legacy in European and global football, which you can both engage in? Do you want to go first, David?
Yeah, sure. Look, he's part of a group of players that have retired now and can go down and can say, I was part of one of the greatest club teams of all time and I was part of one of the greatest national teams of all time. So he's part of that Piqué, Xavi era of players who were that. Iniesta's influence in isolation, absolutely significant, huge for that era of football. When we saw the possession game grow, and then the kind of clamp down on it, the teams kind of rebelling against that, trying to stop it. Iniesta grew to prominence even more because he came the kind of lockpick. And that's how he grew in notoriety further, in the way that he was able to attack defenders, attack midfielders, and pull them out of comfort zones, pull them out of spaces. And Pep Guardiola alluded to this in a book, I do believe, in an interview. And he said that Iniesta changed his kind of view and perception of the game in terms of how players should attack defenders. And he saw Iniesta as somebody who would, magnetize defenders and bring them towards him. Usually the attacker would go to the defender, but in Iniesta's case, because of the way that he moved the ball and he positioned himself, defenders would start and come to him. And Guardiola saw that and said, if you have that kind of ability that Iniesta does, and you have that kind of motion on the football field and the way that you touch the ball, the way you move the ball, then that's what defenders will do. So I think his impact is really, really significant, and it is up there with Xavi for me. I'm a big believer that Xavi changed a lot about football as well and the way that he played. So Iniesta is absolutely up there, and this goes beyond trophies, which he has a lot of.
That's it, really. It is about influence and innovation, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the trophies, in one way, speak for him, but in the other way, it's just. It's just a bit too basic a way of describing what he actually did in terms of his influence and how he changed the way the game was played. I mean, I guess there are two sides to this. If you're talking about a poster boy for the best Barcelona teams, as well as the best Spain teams of sort of the end of the noughties, start of the 2010s, he's a huge part of that. And perhaps actually, like, even more important in his way than, or even more symbolic of what Barcelona were able to do than Xavi or Messi, because he is someone who is an unbelievably gifted individual who instinctivly sacrifices a lot of what he can do to be his best for the team. And of course, if we're thinking of the best Barcelona teams and, thinking how annoyed Zlatan Ibrahimovic was that he felt like an outsider there, is because the collectivity of Barcelona amongst a galaxy of stars of that Barcelona team, especially the 2011 team and the 2009 Champions League winning one to a certain extent, is unmatched. It's incredible. But I do wonder, David, if the way that Iniesta's game develops is partly due to his individual strengths and the individual strengths of those around him. So, Xavi does have that running towards players. Messi does have that running towards players, and of course the finishing touch. I would say of all the players that I can think of in the relatively modern era, the only player who I've seen with a better touch or as good a touch as Iniesta as good close control as Iniesta is probably Zinedine Zidane.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say him.
I think it has to be, really, doesn't it? But if you think of like his early years, and I think this is maybe not acknowledged with Xavi and Iniesta, how they develop, how they change as players over the years, that he gets a lot of injuries in the early part of his career, and a lot of muscle injuries in particular. Iniesta, and you look at him, and I guess he's representative of that Barcelona in that he's not 6'2", he's not ripped. He's fast, but not absolutely express pace as well. So that
he was natural.
Yes. Does his game develop in reaction to a recognition of the limit of his physical capacity?
Absolutely. Played to his strengths, and his strength was being natural. And it's almost a bit cliche, but he continued to play the game, I think, how he played it when he was a kid. And
it's all on his terms, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you are playing on concrete and the ball is bubbling about everywhere, you learn to, hone your touch and be softer with the ball. And he took that to the playing field, to the biggest stage as well, and he continued to play that. And again, Guardiola said that's his best quality, is the fact that he played the game so naturally. And he never lost that. So he changed, but he changed on his own terms. And this is why I say he became even more important as teams started to become more savvy and wise to the tiki-taka, to Spain's football, to Barcelona's football, to these high amounts of possession football. It's very, very difficult in a football game when you have got 10 players sitting behind the ball and they just kind of break us down. People sometimes think, just do something, have a long shot. It's not quite as easy as that. But when you have Iniesta in the team, it makes it a little bit easier, because he can, if there's a brief bit of hesitation, loss of focus from the opponent, Iniesta is the first player to capitalise on it, because he's the one trying to pick that lock.
Yeah, for some listeners, they might be surprised that he's only just retired, because he's been absent from the European scene for the last few years.
He's done well. He chose to go out to Asia as well, and he's done well there. He's had success there, and I think he really enjoyed it. I know his children have learned the language and what have you. He took time to learn the language as well, so he's really embraced it. He did not just go out there for a payday at all. He went to embrace the culture and do something.
And because he wanted to continue to play,
absolutely,
into quite an advanced age as well.
Yeah, and it was a nice place for him to do it. And some players are very keen to learn another culture.
We're talking
entirely.
about Japan.
Yes.
And isn't it remarkable to say that this is a guy who won so much? This is a guy who scored the winning goal in the World Cup final. And there's so much else to say about him and the aesthetic beauty of his game that we didn't even mention, that he scored the winning goal in the World Cup final in 2010.
That's it from us. Thank you for listening to Ask OTC. And if you'd like to ask a question, you can contact us at any time at Radio Dotun, at Andy Brassel, at David Jacka, or at OTC Pod. And you can email us otc@footballramble.com.